Good evening, everybody. My name is Croaky. I use they, them pronouns, and I am one of the variants of Loki, the god of mischief. But in this universe, my name is Kenneth. I use he,
Do
him
I just start
pronouns.
reading, or sorry?
Let me go ahead and introduce you, Tim, and then we'll get going in a minute. Welcome to Poetry at the Point Online, a monthly reading series. This is organized by the St. Louis Poetry Center. I'm super excited to be with you guys this evening and to bring you the poetry of Tim Heerdink, Tony Brewer, and Andrea Scarpino. Welcome to all of you, and thanks for joining. Before we get started, we have a few of the usual quick announcements. First and foremost, our plans, as you well know by now, for returning to in-person events are always in flux, both according to the needs of our poets, as is the case tonight, and also the state of the pandemic we're in. So thanks for your patience as far as that's concerned. As of right now, we do plan to have November's reading in person at the Focal Point, so stay tuned for details for that. It will also be a little bit different and a little bit unique, so I'm really excited about it. I always want to say thank you to all of our many members and supporters at the St. Louis Poetry Center. You can always join and become a member at stlouispoetrycenter.org. And always a big, there we go. It appears like magic out of the multiverse. A big shout out and thank you to the Missouri Arts Council too, whose support helps make this series possible each year. If you are watching this in real time on Facebook Live, pretty please comment and share that link, but also post any questions you have for the poets themselves, because if we have time at the end, we'd like to reserve some space for conversation with these wonderful folks. So please do drop those questions in the comments. If you are viewing this after October 26th, we're still glad you're here, and please still do comment and share this video so that we can build support for this series and for these poets' work. And we'll also post links along the way so that you can buy these folks' work and support them on the internets by accessing their work. So on to poetry. First up is Tim Heerdink, the author of Somniloquy and Trauma in the Not So Well, The Human Remains, Red Flag and Other Poems, Raised Monuments, Checking Tickets on Oumuamua, Sailing the Edge of Time, I Hear a Siren's Call, Ghost Map, A Cacophony of Birds in the House of Dread, and short stories, The Tithing of Man and Heaven 2. His poems appear in various journals and anthologies, and he is the president of the Midwest Writers Guild of Evansville, Indiana. Tim, welcome. Take it away. And Tim, you are on mute, so we need to go ahead and have you unmute yourself, and then you will be good to go.
All right. Yeah, I'm 27, but I'm not very tech savvy whatsoever. This is the first time I've used this camera. I'm going to read some poems from this chapbook, Tabletop Anxieties and Sweet Decay. I did with Tony Brewer. We released it through Roaring Junior Press earlier this month. And I got some other poems too. This one is called Tabletop Anxieties. As you can see behind me, I love board games. So here we go. In case we haven't met, I'm Tim Heerdink, the poet. When it comes to addiction, perhaps board games is how I get my fix. My walls are lined with cardboard creations, each a new world for me to explore. I'd love for you to travel with me as I enter another realm, but please, no food at the table, and be sure to wash your hands. My head clock gets stuck without any hands to spin when cheesy snacks pulled from backpacks enter the sacred space. Don't you dare touch those pieces nor throw them across the room. I think I'm having a heart attack. You can leave now. I'm changing the locks and taking the next ride solo. Thank you. This next one is called Take My Heart, Give Me a Fork. When I map my stars across this great land, may it be for business or leisure, I find myself listening to the growl my gut makes when it remembers food is all that matters when you're out. That bastard will cause you to drive all day just to fill a void with deep fried awesome and leave you feeling used and tired all over without any sliver of gratitude or shame. My stomach wants only the best spots your town has for this bearded face. It's willing to spew out a couple of poems in exchange for a finger in the right direction. We don't need no 5-star suit required joint, but a hole in the wall you won't find advertised because it's well loved by satisfied locals daily. A place you can go with a waitress Betty who works doubles to feed her kids. A single mom who doesn't need a pen to remember what makes you smile. So this is about one of the last dates that Tony and I had together on the string of tour dates we were doing to support that book. It's been fun. I'm going to read one from my first full length, The Human Remains. This one deals a lot with mental health, among other things, and grief and loss. This poem is called Why They Call It a Shoot. There once was a time where death came with a bang, stemming from the smoke of an unholstered barrel straight into your thick, flubbery gut so you can bleed out or be consumed from infection. One didn't have to be such a great marksman back in those days. Air brought its own weapons to the table before modern medicine came with its cures. Not everyone likes their picture taken. It's bad luck, my brother-in-law would tend to say as he covers his face from the snapping screens, which always seem to be out and ready. Photographs lack the importance they held in the past. A portrait well prepared by a professional with a busting bulb takes more effort than wonky expressions pretending to be happiness for nobody but the cloud to see. Smiles are forced for the quick flash because each shot taken takes another little piece of identity until eventually there's nothing left but dead eyes staring forward like a phantom from the past. Let's see. I'm going to read I put out Raised Monuments last year from Finishing Line Press. It's my second Holocaust collection, my first being Red Flag and Other Poems. I have those books. I donate the proceeds to the Candles Holocaust Museum and Education Center in Terre Haute, Indiana, founded by Eva Moses Kaur. She was a survivor of Auschwitz. Her husband, she passed away in 2019, and her husband, Michael Vicky Kaur, he just passed away this past week. And so it's important to keep those voices alive. Let's see, page 13. This next poem is also going to be in my new collection, Somniloquy and Trauma and the Not So Well. And I think that book will be coming out like this weekend. It's coming a lot quicker than I expected, so that's exciting. This one is called Needleman. Positioned in the intersection where two walls collide lies a figure with a top hat 10 inches tall and a grin which never seems to be at ease. A silence engulfs the space between you and the void, begging for the epiphany to blossom like a perennial 79 days since the last warm sunshine. Adjacent a vintage stereo sits a rack of records, some dating back to the days before the bombs fell to put an end to the last World War. What will it be today, sir? Shall I put on the Wagner or something a bit more modern? Asked the apparition, anticipating an answer powerful enough to transfer all present to another place, another time where all the outside disappears. Placing the needles elate the towering fellow, like his sole purpose is fulfilled that very moment, and he is free to be absorbed back into the drywall after a tip of his brim, knowing music fills the halls once more. Yeah, my new book, Somniloquy and Trauma and the Not So Well, has to do a lot with my nightmares and my sleep talking. And so I'm going to read a couple of new pieces from that collection, and it'll be available from Cage and Mutt Press, probably around Halloween. So it's exciting. It's a very spooky book. This one's called What's Left Over from a Haunting. Enter the shell which used to be called home long before you held your baby girl, after the city forced a relocation, an attempt at a new beginning. This structure, walls where love lived, while another force sat dormant at the end of your bed, watching sleeping occupants as breath came and went. For half a decade, the belief that residual apparitions, after an intervention of biblical measure, found peace like troubled children when the tired parent finally notices they've gone missing. A 12 gauge meant to claim an entire family, but only took the father, who forgot the first rule of self-preservation, still resides upstairs, along with the man who knocks constantly on the plaster. He's waiting for his loved ones to come home. Yeah, I grew up in plenty of haunted houses. I used to do paranormal investigations, but that kind of got me in trouble. So this is the place that I go in my grief and my depression. I made it up for the book, but it's the name and whatnot. It's called The Not So Well. There was a time when I stood guard like one of those Brits in their furry hats without any emotion, just doing my duty as a good gentleman should, never looking elsewhere but straight ahead of me. The cruelest taunts always failed to break my gaze with posture not unlike the great rustic cross which held the alleged Messiah long before this time. One afternoon, while busy at work, a storm cloud blew. It pushed me into the not-so-well, where the not-so-well often dwell. I thought I knew all the tricks on how to escape, but it seems that I might have been in this place for longer than I think. All around me there are weeping shadows, endless rain, no hope to make the climb. It's too steep, even for the most experienced climber, of which I thought I was. The well fills, and it fills with the tears of the crying and undying sorrow. Another man down in this well asked me, "Don't you know you did this to yourself?" Like my hands held the shovel that dug this hole we both find ourselves. That's when my mind went blank for a brief period. I came to with the man lying on the bottom. I noticed that I am still digging the hole. I have one more poem after this, but this is the last poem in that new book, Soliloquy and Traveling Not So Well. This one's called Found Poem After Catastrophe. Caught a soundbite just the other night telling those too stubborn to evacuate the area to please write some information of identification and zip it in a plastic tucked in your pocket so workers know who to give that corpse after this trilogy of majestic storms passes. Nobody is coming to protect your person. No, they're all too busy getting the hell out. So my body's flowing lonely down our new river divide in this neighborhood. I thought you'd get more enjoyment stumbling upon my last written verse over struggling to finish this puzzle. I started to determine who I thought I was. Let the rain pull me south. Today's a good day to see Mom again. There's never been a better time or place to see her face shine than the second I begin to taste the salt and fail at breath in depths which still the last line. Weight taken from me like I've cut off my limbs, and the freedom to be nothing is a risk I'd be willing to take if only I didn't live so far away. And I put out 6 books this year, 9 total. This last selection is from my first one I put out in the year, Checking Tickets on Oumuamua. I'm real big into science fiction, and at first I was the Holocaust guy, the mental health guy, and I was like, I want to be some science fiction too. And so I'll end with that. Halloween's just around the corner, and I'm excited. This one's called Her Place Among the Stars. As I lay my head to rest after a Monday's trials, I see my deceased mom waving at me in the middle of all the colors dancing brightly around her in joy. My train car starts to depart her sky station in heaven, and a slow knock which grabs me with a backward pull, the direction opposite from my fallen Genesis. This building acceleration comes with the painful realization as her likeness grows smaller. I won't be seeing her again for as long as I live. All the majesty of flashing nebula around me can't break my focus from Mom's moving hand, signaling me off to return to this body on Earth. A blue hue illuminates our somber quarters, causing arthritic fingers to search for a remote, while I wait for my one-way ticket to be checked. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tim. I really appreciate it. I'm going to be quizzing you a lot on how in the hell you wrote 6 books or put out 6 books in 1 year. So I really appreciate it. Stick around. We'll see you in a minute. Next up is Tony, and I need to get to my notes here. Tony Brewer is a poet, live sound effects artist, and event producer. He is executive director of the spoken word stage at the 4th Street Arts Festival and president of the National Audio Theater Festival. His books include The Great American Scapegoat, Little Glove in a Big Hand, Hot, Tight, Cold Read, I assume, not read, Homunculus, and brand new from Alien Buddha Press, The History of Projectiles. Tony has been offering poetry on demand at coffee houses, museums, cemeteries, churches, bars, and art and music festivals for over a decade. And he is 1/3 of the poetry performance group, incredibly titled Reservoir Dogwoods. You can also access more of his stuff at the website on your screen right now. So without further ado, Tony, the stage is yours.
Thanks for having me, Kenneth. It's good to be here. I wanted to start with something, an untitled poem that, so I wrote a series of poems on a theme for a reading that I gave at a park here in Bloomington, Indiana, which is where I'm from. Back at the beginning of October, I was partnered with a naturalist who gave a talk about leaves and trees and the changing of the seasons. And I wrote a bunch of poems about leaves on the theme of, this is a new word that I learned, Sithurism, P-S-I-T-H-U-R-I-S-M, Sithurism, which means the sound of wind in the trees and the rustling of leaves. So here is an untitled poem from that collection. I reside this time of year inside the dance of forests letting go, and fields and lots developed with their single ornamental maples release into fresh atmosphere the dead seeds of oxygen. I know where this is leading, to a tawny quilt my neighbor mows hopefully one last time. I cannot yet be bothered by the web at my screen door. The wolf rappels down, fat as a tree full of summer. I hear the crow Congress replace the decibels of cicadas finally, disappearing into the hiss, bellowed counterpart to branch, who will take over the yard, winded leaf tumbling in no wind. I heard the storm take them down the other night, lash window panes with red, wet bodies spinning with fret. I sleep better in this weather. Sunset radiant as a tree, and snapping wrinkly leaves, one by one, plink off into another rakeful patch of earth, little blanket of grass, like grains whirling down the throat of an hourglass. I'm gonna read one from the chapbook I just put out together with Tim Heerdink there. Tabletop Anxieties and Sweet Decay is the name of it, and his I like to say that his tabletop is pretty anxious, and my decay is pretty sweet. So that's kind of how we split things up. And this is called Curators of a Sort. They rescinded the order to wear gloves when handling rare books because they make them hard to hold. Hot and sweaty, the curators caress as filthy as skin behind even cotton, conserving patina like a monk. Washing your hands is just as good. Gloves, they determine, decrease the ability to feel and increase risk of rip or drop. We rely on the tactility of manual dexterity of bare hands to make us persevere, want to feel the fragile edges of each other and lift friable ink from pages with our own nervous oils. No false security barrier, not butler's hands, Mickey Mouse minstrel hands. Strip the plastic off grandma's couch and let's get nasty on the doilies. someday. I'm joking now, but librarians do it in stacks, and once the gloves are off, we'll never wear them again. Here is a newish one that I'm collecting into a new manuscript. It's hopefully going to be out next year. Should be early next year, hopefully. This is They Always Come Back. And this is one of, I called them the Rona poems. These are poems that I wrote early during lockdown. I do 30 and 30 every April. Have for about 13 or 14 years now, where you write a poem a day for the month for a National Poetry Month in April. And last April was difficult, but I powered through and read 30 anyway, and this was one of them. They always come back. Birds first. Parliament of crows in stooped trees, enshrouding the railroad tracks as graceful plastic bags tumbleweed the buds. Geese in crooked V's spelled across a valiant sky, honking like lonesome traffic. Raptors hunting downtown mice sunbathing in the unsafe gray. Herons peg-legged in the campus crick, like canaries ruffling in a coal mine. 2 by 2, mammals emerge. Possums ambling across barren streets with relaxed perma-sneers. Rabbits humping openly in the side yard as grass worms love around them. All emboldened by our absence and the suddenly clearer air returning for us to admire. Is a lie spring spreads like a virus. Dolphins always swim in Venice. Coyotes have always dogged the steps of urban deer. Chickadees have always harassed me with their black-capped complaints. Why this house here? Why these windows mirroring the sky? Peeping at my window, not asking for a truce. I'm going to do 2 more, I think. Excuse me. This is from, you're right, it's Reed, Hot Type Cold Reed. And this is about a trip I took to Maine. Excuse me. A trip I took to Maine. Man, it's been like 12 years now. It doesn't seem like it's been that long, but it's been 12 years. So this is called, this is Down East. Down East. Somewhere around here, Paul Stuckey started a radio station that has played Puff the Magic Dragon 24/7 since 1968, except for break-ins from Democracy Now! And the Hightower Report. People from Boston are called massholes. Limp shedders in a convenience store tanked too long are yesterday's pound. Ask a local, lived here all your life? And he'll answer, not yet. Such happy yellow rubber trousers with booties attached and suspenders extending out of a hang-down mustache as dark and downturned as the mouth underneath. He's a watercolor of a wharf, stacking cages and banding claws and thinking of his manicured ex-wife's painted nails and mouth, how she hated his Irish music, and boy, that was a deal breaker. He could have just not let her get that close instead of running all the way to Maine to escape after the divorce. But the sun isn't hiding when it doesn't show its face. A milky pearl in clam-colored skies, here comes the squall. Snap. That's how the weather works here. A rock-bound smugness saying, you just don't know the world like we do. Thumbs under suspenders like tongues on long vowels dying at the back of the throat. A fish slides easily through the hand until the fins prick like quills when you try to hold it fast and scale and clean and gut it. He prefers claws and armor boiling in a pot and putting up a good fight with a hammer and tongs and a long buttery fork. Imagine trying to live here without synthetics, all oilskin and sealskin and real skin against wet wool dried over a smoky fire, and then another time, blubber. Fat people rich, now fat people poor. The boat is not his life. It's got a name, like a wife, and he loves every catch she dumps on her deck, writhing like a sequin dress she's not clean enough to wear. So it just lays there, all pretty on the bed. A radio's the only thing still running when a nor'easter knocks the power out. He cranks it like a phonograph, and out comes Elvis Costello, pretending he's Pete Seeger doing a terrible Burl Ives. All that tremolo wheezing forth, he'd almost rather hear the news. And off the coast, a foghorn sounding all night, all year, though no one lives there, ever since the keeper passed away, remote controlled since 1958. He can tune a violin by it. G sharp. And the waves lapping the granite beach clean. Our whole rests. And I think I have time for just one more. This is, I've been doing this one all year because I wrote it 17 years ago for the 17-year cicadas that came through and bothered everybody 17 years ago. And I think they were worse back then, but they came through this summer. And so I've been doing this at every reading this year. This is called Cicada Blues, chorus 10 and 17. Ooh, love to love you, baby. Ooh, love to love you, baby. Ooh, love to love you, baby. I will come back for you, baby. Maybe 17 years from tonight, but I will come for you. Up from the ground through a hole this big, and I'll crawl. I'll crawl across the lawn, baby. Drag my freshly hatched ass over sidewalks and quiet city streets just to get you to come to me. I'll climb the most convenient tree I find and shed this hard, crusty exterior and back out of my pupil state. And when I'm dry and strong enough and I unfurl my clear wings, I will call to you, call to you, call to you, call to you. And I hope you'll hear me among the million brothers in this humble acre, alone, vying for your attention, and that you'll come to me. Come to me now, baby. Please don't make my soul wait on the cold ground another 17 long years. Come land on my beach branch and we'll make sweet butt-to-butt love and place our progeny within the spent sapling soiled pulp under a heavy haze of June on a long-lost Indiana afternoon, and then together we'll die. Ooh, love to love you, baby. Ooh, love to love you, baby. Thank you.
I don't even know what to say to follow that up. Just thank you. Thank you so much for that gift of singing. That was lovely. Does not happen often at poetry. Not often enough at poetry at the point. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tony, stick around. I'll look forward to some conversations in a minute. Yeah, lots of snaps for that. Finally this evening, Andrea, gosh, we always try to pronounce your name differently than it actually is. Andrea Scarpino has published the poetry collections Once Upon Wing Lake, What the Willow Said as It Fell, and Once Then, and the co-edited anthology Undocumented, Great Lakes Poets Laureate, try to say that 5 times fast, on social justice. She received a PhD in creative writing from Bath Spa University and an MFA from The Ohio State University. She's also co-editor of 9 Mile Magazine and served as Poet Laureate of Michigan's Upper Peninsula from 2015 to 2017. She very recently began working as the executive director at The Noble Neighbor and is my predecessor as the curator and host of this very reading series. So it's lovely to have you on the reading stage, Andrea, so welcome.
Thank you so much, Kenneth. I am so happy to be here. Thank you to Tim and Tony. Your readings were beautiful. So it's lovely to share this virtual stage with you all. And really thank you to the St. Louis Poetry Center. It's so nice to be back. So, and thank you to all of you watching at home. I appreciate you logging in this funny time. So I'm actually going to start with a couple of pandemic poems. I apologize in advance for that, but this is my first poetry reading since the pandemic began. So I am going to read all new poems And I have my poems just on my screen. So if I'm staring crazy at the camera, I apologize. I'm reading from the screen. So especially in the beginning of the pandemic, I thought a lot about the ways in which we connect to one another or don't connect to one another. So this is a poem that remembers collect calls. Those of you who are my age or older might also remember those. So this is called Quarantined, I Remember Collect Calls. Quarantined, I remember collect calls. How my father said at the end of each call, you can always reverse the charge. And I did. Dialed 0 from my mother's house, payphone, from a highway rest stop, and told the operator I'd like to make a collect call. She would ask for the number, my name, ask my father if he'd accept the charge. I miss his yes. I miss how he always said yes, even when I called in peak hours from 12 states away or in the middle of the night. Even if he had been sleeping, working, making dinner, he always said yes. And there would be a pause while the operator connected us. So this is another quarantine, early pandemic poem. When my partner, Zach, and I were trying to make the very best of not being able to go out to dinner. So this is called Quarantined Aperol Spritzes. We drag inside our wooden table, chairs, and set up a cafe in our living room. Aperol, Prosecco, a thickly cut orange slice. This time last year, we were in Slovenia, found a table next to the Ljubljanica, and ordered our server's favorite drink. Now we sit in our living room cafe and eat pizza like that night, except we've been inside 2 months already and don't know when we might travel again, even to the next state. I sip my drink and squint through the sunlight. Just the right bitter and sweet. So I also thought a little bit, especially in the beginning days of the pandemic, about some other pandemics and other illnesses that were really dangerous for us. So those of you who are a fan of the comic movie Balto might know this story a little bit. It was called The Great Race of Mercy, and it was this dog race where dog sled teams ran to Nome, Alaska, to bring this diphtheria antitoxin to a town, to Nome, where children were dying of diphtheria. And, you know, Balto is the hero of the movie, but he was not even the best dog in the race. But this is a poem that's called The Great Race of Mercy. Winter wind, the kind that stiffens fingers through thick gloves, breaks tree branches clean from trunks, icicles a beard, freezes a dog in place. Winter snow, the kind that climbs a man's waist. Longest nights of the year, and a child sick, then another, a town of children dying. Once upon a time, vials of medicine tucked into a sled, 5 days to make a trip that should have taken weeks, the children saved. Once upon a time, we chose to ease another's suffering, night after night running, minus 50 degrees. Love in the attempt. Love in a dog with aching paws. Love in a dog with aching legs, ice stinging his paws, because a man he loved trusted him to keep running. We had that in us once. So this poem is based more recently on the US withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan. So maybe some of you saw this photo, I became minorly obsessed with it, of Major General Chris Donahue, who was the last American soldier leaving Afghanistan, leaving Kabul. And it's this kind of round night vision photograph, all green. And I just spent a lot of time staring at it, I'll be honest. And he was the person who was in charge of kind of withdrawing the final troops from Afghanistan. So this picture was taken on August 30th, 2021, and the poem is called The Last American. 11:59 p.m. Even in defeat, down to the last minutes. A man walking in battle gear, helmets, goggles, bulletproof vest. In his hand, a gun with its strap hanging, almost an afterthought. A circle of green life on an empty tarmac. In the distance, vehicles, buildings, a plane. In the distance, other men with guns, other losses, defeats. What is it in his face? Concentration? Relief? 20 years ago, I marched in protest of this war, called my senators, president. It did no good. It did no good, but still, I'm glad I did it. Now that we've left, why do I stare at this man's face? This man in charge of leaving. I'd like to ask him how it feels and would he do it again? I'd like to take the gun from his hand and say, what next? It's funny to read without having any feedback from an audience. So I'm just gonna keep plowing ahead. And this next poem is untitled currently. I do want to give a content warning. It does contain violence. So if you would like to skip this poem, that is totally fine. You can mute me now. You can always mute me, that you have that power. And I will just raise my hand again when the poem is over. So if you want to mute, go ahead and I will give you the signal when I am done reading. So this is currently untitled. When a man is murdered feet from my back door, I don't want to hear about goodness or grace or gratitude for the life he lived before we found him bleeding and gasping for breath, before he was hit by his car, sneakers knocked from his feet. I don't want to hear about security lights. It was noon on a sunny Tuesday. I don't want to hear about fate. There was a man parking his car, a man with a gun walking down our alley. I don't want to hear about giving up your property. Don't ever fight, the cop with blue eyes said, intent. I don't want to hear it's the victim's job to live. Our neighbor held her newborn in a car seat, came upon a dying man, started CPR. I ran for the ambulance, rocked her baby, found a wallet and phone in the weeds, prayed to a God I don't believe listens. I don't want to hear about justice, how cops arrested someone before they even finished hosing blood from the street. A man was loved by his daughters, friends, strangers who knew him minutes. I want to hear about that love. I want to hear it grows. If we plant enough of it, I want to hear love grows like a prickly weed or morning glories or mint, chokes out everything but love, carpets this hard earth with its sticky, sweet scent. So I just have two more poems. This next one is based on a true story that happened to my brother and I when we were little. So this is dedicated to my brother. This is called Red Race Car. Red Race Car. My brother was 3 or 4 and wanted a red race car from the gumball machine that spit out toys and plastic eggs. And after our mother gave us a quarter for the machine, I told him we don't get to choose our toy. We may not get the race car. And he nodded like he understood, but I knew he didn't. And I was so scared of disappointing him. I started planning how I'd beg another quarter from our mother, who didn't believe in wasting money on plastic toys in the grocery store. And he spun the dial with his one wish and reached his little boy hand in the chute and opened the plastic egg. And there it was, the red race car. And we screamed and hugged and ran to show our parents, and his smile took up his whole face. And in that moment, I think I promised him he'd never feel disappointment. And that was a lie, but oh, what glorious magic. So this is my final poem. I have gotten very irritated with grind culture and everybody, working as hard as they possibly can. And I thought for a minute in the pandemic, we were all going to chill out a little bit. But as vaccines rolled around, I feel like we didn't learn the lesson of slowing down. So this is a poem that kind of speaks to that. And it's based in part on spending the afternoon with my friend Anne and her little baby Joseph, her newborn Joseph. So this is for Anne and baby Joseph. It's called Praise. This poem is in praise of giving up, slamming shut open windows, burning bridges to metal beams, in praise of letting go the daily grind, multitasking, setting unreachable goals. This poem won't prove what's possible. This poem won't lean in or tag the right accounts. This poem won't optimize. This poem won't search for the silver lining or the next best thing in leadership. This poem is in praise of saying no. This poem is in praise of tea and the time it takes to steep, sweeten, cool enough to drink. In praise of a long afternoon with a baby asleep in your arms. This poem is in praise of the monks who eat from the same wooden bowl each meal. In praise of the farmer who watches rain move across her fields. In praise of the honey bees take months to make. In praise of a slow inhale, exhale. This poem is in praise of saying enough. Rest now. It's time to let the day go. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrea. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to chat with you and the others because we do have some time now. And maybe I'll just start kind of on the last thing you've mentioned a couple of times throughout your, which is just the idea of mental health, of honoring. I really, really appreciate how you honored folks who may have surfaced some trauma with a particular, subject you mentioned. So I just want to talk about mental health in general, if we could. And Tim, you mentioned that as well. I want to just start there. How can poetry, trauma is such a big subject. So how can poetry be in service of processing trauma, of helping us become more mentally healthy, right? How can something as simple as a poem be in service of that to us? And so I'll pick on you to start, Andrea, if I could.
Yeah, that's a hard question, Kenneth. I mean, I think on the one hand, I want to say it can't. I mean, a poem is not big enough to hold our mental health. I also think that for me, poetry and writing is a really important outlet for my own mental health. When I'm not writing, I know things are not going well mentally for me. And when I am writing, I know that my anxiety is better, that I'm doing just better in the world. So I think that there are so many facets to mental health, and we need to, really be thinking about the many different ways to keep ourselves healthy. And I don't think just one poem can probably do that. But I do think that for me, at least, it is a really important barometer of how I'm doing in the world, and it helps me to be doing better.
Sure. Absolutely. Tim, I'm thinking too of kind of what, you mentioned you have a couple of books that refer to the Holocaust, right? So, I mean, poetry can also bear witness in that way too. I'm curious if you were kind of thinking about that as you were crafting those books.
Yeah, certainly. I very much was interested in the Holocaust, and I thought that writing poems and essays and whatnot on the subject can kind of keep the conversation going on those subjects, along with the ones on mental health. And I thought that even for myself with my own mental health, writing can be an outlet that also kind of lets people know that they're not alone. They can hear someone else's story and connect with it, and maybe feel inspired to, I don't know, not that they have to be creative themselves, but they can kind of know that there's a light, I guess, per se, on the other side of things. That they're not just doing this all by themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, something that at my work we've begun to discuss kind of how we can be more trauma informed, and it's been helpful for me to think about shifting the question from what's wrong with you to what happened to you, right? Which is much more connected to kind of what you're talking about, storytelling, and again, what we've mentioned, kind of bearing witness. So I appreciate that. Tony, any thoughts or anything that you might kind of add to this conversation?
Sure. So a chapbook that I put out a bunch of years ago called Little Glove and a Big Hand was about a traumatic thing that happened when I was very young. I had a cousin who died in a farming accident when he and I were both 4 years old. And I was not really, I mean, we were like brothers, but, I was so young and I was kind of sheltered from the grieving process that I wasn't really aware of how it affected me until many years later. And I wrote about that for a long time. I probably wrote about Jeffrey for probably 20 or 25 years. And I really didn't like any of it because it was, and I never really did much with it because it was right here. I was too close to it. And it wasn't until long into adulthood that I kind of figured out what my grieving process is. And I kind of like got things sorted out and then pulled a book out of it. So I'm not sure that the poetry was therapeutic. I did some therapy and kind of came away from that with a better understanding of what I was after with the poems. So I'm not sure that writing poems or even performing poems are necessarily therapeutic, but they definitely, I think, like Tim said, they kind of keep you in touch or get you in touch with other people who are with a certain amount of familiarity with what you're going through, or that you hear a poem or read a poem that resonates with you because of something that you've gone through. So
yeah,
the process is a little murky about whether it's helpful or not, because I kind of think I think most art is in some ways exploitative, because you're kind of because of the observing and the taking away that you do from these events and whatnot. Doesn't mean that it's not valuable, but I'm not so keen on the therapeutics of it, but the process is still.
That's totally fair. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I want to shift a little bit away from that topic and ask something that I kind of noticed that you all have in common in some respects, which is you are literary citizens, for lack of a better term, right? I mean, you all are responsible for something that relates to literature, to letters, if people still actually use that term. Tony, you're involved in organizing arts and festivals. Andrea, you work for the Noble Neighbor. Tim, you're connected to the Midwest Writers Guild. I'm curious how you envision yourself being responsible as a poet citizen, right? And kind of your outgrowth beyond just in your writing space crafting poetry. That's not the entirety of who you are as a writer. So I'm wondering if anybody wants to kind of just talk about the connection between your craft, your work, and the work you do with others, and how that makes sense to your work in its entirety. I'm going to pick on Andrea to start again.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are a lot of ways to think of yourself as a literary citizen. You know, when I was poet laureate of the Upper Peninsula, I took that really seriously of like, I want to be able to showcase all the amazing poetry that is happening in this area. And I think people sometimes forget about poetry as an art form. Like, I think that kids love to read poetry, and then there's some certain point when we've decided it's really hard and we don't like it as much. And I really take it upon myself to help people see that there's so much, especially in contemporary poetry right now, that if you don't like one poet or one poem, like there is somebody else out there for you, you know? And I think that's an important part of being a literary citizen and caring about words and caring about language, that you kind of share other people and, you know, lift up other people's words and kind of get out there sharing this art form with others, because otherwise it just dies, right? We don't want it to just sit on a bookshelf forever. I think that it's more meaningful to be out there interacting with audiences.
Tim, Tony, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely like keeping the topic of poetry alive and the community. I also, working with the Midwest Writers Guild, work with all kinds of genres of writers, and I love doing mixed genre events, kind of just giving everybody a place to show what they got going on. We've been working with reading series and whatnot, but even with the poetry, I mixing it with music, working with musicians, having like broadsides. I love to do some more broadsides with artists. Not just having it on the shelf, but having it where you can display it as art. That's always something I liked, and having where you can listen to it. I've been helping with publishing here in Evansville, and just all kinds of things in the literary area, just kind of trying to help everyone out with whatever they would need with their writing.
Yeah, and I feel in that way it kind of helps poetry. Not that poetry needs help, but it assists kind of folks seeing poetry as one of many art forms that they are familiar with and comfortable with and engage with on a regular basis. Tony, I'm wondering kind of if that is something that you get up to when you're working on these festivals.
Well, I was going to say too that when I first started doing like event organizing, and especially like organizing readings and open mics and that sort of thing, it was pretty self-serving. I wanted a venue where I could read my stuff, and the best way to do that was to build an audience, and less so over time, because you kind of build the network and everyone kind of takes part, and it becomes less and less about me and more about the thing, and more about the community. The thing that continues to be very community service oriented for me is the poetry on demand, because I'm providing the craft, but I do not provide the inspiration. I have a conversation with people about what kind of poem they want. They tell me what kind of poem they want, and I kind of tease details out of them through a conversation, and then I send them away for a while, and they come back in 10 or 15 minutes and I have a poem for them. And that's so I'm providing the muscle, but I'm not, they're the ones that say they want a poem. I'm not like foisting it upon them or anything like, but that's been an amazing experience, because some people, it seems like they've been waiting their whole life for someone to ask them to write a poem for them. Like they know exactly what they want, no hesitation. And other people, you like, they really like the idea, and then you get down to what they want the poem to be about, and they maybe freeze a little bit because they want to choose their words very carefully. But I just keep writing notes until I get enough and say, okay, I can work with that, and then and then move on. So I don't know. I'm not sure if that answered your question, but.
No, it does. And now you're making me think of kind of, I'm always curious about what is the line between kind of our responsibility as poets to kind of be champions for poetry, be poet citizens, and making it, trying to choose my words carefully here, dumb it down would be the phrase we would use a lot. That is the phrase I don't want to use, right? But like, how do we make it so accessible that we're watering down the product, if you will, right? Or is there even such a thing? Is that something we shouldn't be worried about? I mean, poetry is susceptible to capitalism, just like everything else, right? So how do we present it in a way that keeps the poetry's integrity and doesn't make it a product like everything else I feel like we're consuming, right?
I've been in conversations with folks that I work on a festival with, the National Audio Theater Festival. We talk about being gatekeepers, which is not, which is not a term that I like because it has a lot of negative connotations. But in some ways, you're fostering, you're kind of fostering the next generation, or you're fostering the next people to come along and do what you're doing, or see what you're doing and want to do that. And so you're trying to like set an example, but also keep the bar where you want it to be. It's kind of like if you're an editor for a journal or something, you're basically, you are setting the tone, you're setting the taste, for that publication. And so, so yeah, I mean, that's a lot of it is, what do you choose to read, or what do you choose to promote? What sort of writers or poets. I think all of us do a little bit of organizing in terms of, obviously you do, Crocky, organizing a reading
Croaky.
series. Croaky. Oh, right. But so that's, I mean, that is, in a sense, that is some gatekeeping. And so you want to like not be the keeper, just like help get people to help you build the gate. But it's not really a gate. It's more like a staircase, I guess, where everybody's on different levels and you're all trying to get up. Yeah.
Tim, Andrea, what's the difference for you between gatekeeping and stair managing, I guess?
Well, we've had a conversation, Tony and I, recently on like what is like the popular poetry compared to like what we think is, what we usually would tend to like. And honestly, I mean, everyone's idea of poetry is different, of course, and what's accessible to the mainstream world. And you almost wonder, I mean, of course there's connections and whatnot, and there's a lot of good poetry out there, and I'd love to see more of it out in the stores. But it's just the connections, I guess. And sometimes people get books just to kind of say they have books. I know there's a lot of that too. I think when it comes to writing, I like to think I write to every person, not just like to other poets. You know what I mean? And just something that people can connect with. But there are a lot of people who have this idea that poetry is some kind of high society, hard to read stuff. And I always just say, if you don't like poetry, you probably just haven't read the right poet yet. I mean, I know going through school, a lot of that stuff that we were kind of told to read probably isn't everyone's style. And so that might have turned some people off to the genre altogether.
Agreed. Andrea, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts. I don't know that any are cohesive, but I think I'm very well aware that I have a lot of privilege as a white poet, as a cisgender woman who's writing. And I am also aware that, women were kept out of poetry, right? When they do annual analyses of gender components in literary magazines, it's still really atrocious in 2020, 2021. And I know the same is true of Black and Brown authors. So I try to be very cognizant that I am not keeping gates, right? And that I'm helping everybody knock them down. And so I think that sometimes a poem that I don't necessarily connect with is really important because it helps other people connect with it. And that there's literary quality in that. If any one person is connecting with that language, that's super important and necessary, and that poem needs to be in the world. So that's kind of, I kind of am a more, I guess, anarchist about it. But at the same time, like I am a co-editor of 9 Mile Magazine, you know, and so I do have to say no thank you to poets for different reasons when they send me my work. And it is really hard. And those are conversations that are really hard to have about why do I think that this poem is not a good fit for the magazine right now? And what are my biases that are coming to play in my judgment of this particular poem? And I don't know if we ever really can articulate all of that successfully, but I think it's something we need to be very aware of.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. You're making me think too, my Wizards of Oz, who are Aaron and Haley, can remind me to post in maybe the Facebook comments. You're reminding me of an organization that I'm blanking of the name of right now that was kind of co-founded by Aaron Ballou and Kate Marvin to draw more attention to those disparities of the lack of women in kind of popular journals and magazines. So I'll make sure and post that when we're done. So we are at time, if you can believe it. So I just want to say thank you so much to all of you for joining this evening. It's been a real pleasure. Our next reading is going to be on November 23rd, if I have my calendar correct. So mark that down. Our readers will be members of, I'm just going to call it a collective of TikTok poets. That includes yours truly. It includes Andrea, a couple of folks you've seen earlier this year, Stephanie Russell, Stephen Schroeder, also Lizzie Peterson, Allison Cundiff. We might be able to suck Aaron Quick into this too, if I can play my cards right. So stay tuned for that. Just a reminder, you'll be able to view tonight's reading on Facebook after tonight. So if you're viewing that after October 26th, again, thank you. Thank you to all you poets, Andrea, Tim, Tony, for sharing your work with us. Thank you to Aaron and Haley for turning all of those internet and technology gears well and making everything run smoothly. Thanks to all of you who choose to show up looking at your computer in the evening, perhaps after a whole day of looking at the computer like I did, or on down the road after the reading to hear and see some poetry. Everybody have a lovely night. Thanks for joining. See ya. Happy Halloween.